I grew up in Michigan and touched a computer for the first time way back in 1971. Fell in love with the idea of programming and came up here to the University of Michigan, got a couple of degrees in computer science and computer engineering, and launched a career that actually looked perfect. Everything the world measures as success, I had. I got promotions every year, I got raises every year, I got more stock options, all the things the world says you should be doing, I had. And yet in here, I was dying. I was very frustrated. I was tired. I did not believe I was doing good work. I didn't believe the teams I was leading was doing good work. And I actually considered just leaving the profession entirely. I didn't want to be in it anymore because I knew I couldn't stay in this profession the way it was working for me and survive. You know, it was too hard. It was too unfulfilling. And yet the world kept telling me I was doing fine. You know, my bosses kept saying, "Oh, you're doing a good job." And I'm like, "No, I'm not. This could be so much better." And so instead of leaving, I decided to change the industry. And my first part of my journey led me to authors and books. So I know you love books. You write books. That's an honorable thing to do for sure. And so the books I was reading, though, were not about technology. The books I was reading was about management, about people, about design thinking, about different ways to organize human beings more effectively. And so I started to understand that there was, in fact, different ways of working, different ways of approaching leadership, different ways of approaching management. And so 1997, I was promoted to vice president of R&D for a public company here in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And for 2 years, I just worked harder. I just tried harder, and that didn't work either. And then in 1999, I had what we call a click moment, where suddenly everything became clear. All that reading, all that preparation, all that study paid off in an instant. And I saw very clearly what I had to do, how I had to do it, who I was going to do it with. And I ended up literally transforming that tired old public company to something that looks a lot like Menlo Innovations does today. And I got back to a word that I didn't use back then. I didn't learn to use it till later, but it was clearly there. I got back to joy. I got back to joy in my profession. I got back to joy in my career. I got back to a place where I thought all the things I dreamed were possible in my profession were actually happening. And then in 2001, it was all taken away from me when the internet bubble burst. We had been purchased by a California company. Their stock collapsed. They had to shut down every remote office they had, including ours here in Ann Arbor. And I was out of work for the first time in my career. And in that moment, I knew this was the time, because they could take away all the worldly stuff, the job, the paycheck, the stock options, but they couldn't take away what I had learned in those 2 years. And what I had learned is there's a completely different model for leading an organization. And we founded Menlo Innovations in 2001 with a big mission. We wanted to end human suffering in the workplace and technology. And we wanted to do that by bringing joy back. And that's what we've been working on for the last 21 years.
Wow. Thanks a lot for sharing that. Let's travel time together. Okay, Richard. All right. So when I was very, very little, I always wanted to become an astronaut and wearing the suit and jumping in different planet. Life didn't give me anything near to it. And I knew that you touched to the computer in 1971, really fall in love with that, right? Like you say earlier. But let's travel all the way back further when you was young. a little boy, what was your dream about the future is gonna be for you?
Like you, when I was young, uh, we were sending rockets into space for the first time.
Mm,
By the time I was 12 years old or 11, we were landing a man on the moon.
mm,
And science fiction was playing a big role in my head. Um, Things like Star Trek, 2001, A Space Odyssey. These movies were telling us that space was a big deal. So I think, like you, I still want to go out into space. If I ever get an opportunity, I'm going to go out into space. But I thought probably the route there was going to be as a pilot. And
mm.
so I was very interested in becoming a commercial airline pilot.
Ah,
Um, and so that was one big dream I had when I was a kid, was flying airplanes. I actually got a pilot's license when I was about 20 years old, and I learned to fly, you know, Piper aircraft, little, 4-seat aircraft, and that sort of thing. So I did pursue that dream, but more as a hobby than as a profession.
ah. So you did pursue that dream, but then the whole passion back then was onto the computer science and in the technology then. Richard, you were so successful in in the outlook when the people look at you back then, because keep getting promotion, keep getting a lot of like recognitions and higher salary and stuff like that, but then from the inside of you, you were not happy. So what happened in that, Richard, from the inside back then though?
Uh, you know, um, what I was experiencing and what I was seeing around me was, when you go to build something, and what I was building then was software.
Mm,
And when you start a software project from the beginning, when there's sort of a blank sheet of paper on a table and you have an idea, somebody says, we'd like to build software to do this.
mm,
And I think every builder has this opportunity, whether you're building buildings or bridges or highways or companies or software. There's that moment where there's a blank piece of paper,
yeah,
and that is such an exciting moment because all the possibilities are there in front of you. All of your imagination and creativity and innovation is going to come to bear. And so you charge into that new project with great excitement. And I know I did. I had many opportunities like that to start a new project from the beginning.
mm,
But somewhere along the way, as you start to build it, as you start to build a team to build it, um, as you're approaching deadlines to get that thing that you're building out into the world, something terrible starts to happen.
mm,
Um, you you planned as best as you could, but your plans fall apart. You tried to hire the best people you could, but they're producing poor quality. Um, you tried to create something that would thrill the people who are going to use it someday,
mm,
and yet you find out nobody understands what you built. And so you start to try and fix those things. You start to try and work more hours to hit a deadline, and you start working lots of overtime. Um, and In that overtime, you get tired and you make mistakes. And those mistakes become very apparent as the deadline approaches because you have a quality assurance team who's coming back saying, hey, this doesn't work, and this doesn't work, and this doesn't work, and this doesn't work. And the number of things going wrong just starts to pile high.
mm.
And so you sit in a meeting, particularly if I was in leadership, and you start to sort through all of the problem reports. And you start to say, oh, this has to be fixed, and this can wait, and this one will call a feature, or we won't pay attention to it. We'll just document that this problem exists. And in those moments, you're tired, The people around you are tired, they're frustrated. The people who are trying to use it can't make it work. The people who are trying to test it tell you there's all these problems. And that dream of the blank piece of paper fades quickly.
Oh.
And then you're just racing towards a deadline with seemingly no chance to produce to produce something you feel proud about. You know, W. Edwards Deming said once so famously that all anyone asks for is a chance to work with pride. And I did not have that chance. The deadlines were impossible. The quality problems were everywhere. The users that were using the software were frustrated. And so then that project ends and it's behind you. And then a new blank piece of paper happens. And you say to yourself, this time is going to be different. And it wasn't. And it was the same thing over and over and over again. It was kind of like a nightmare, a recurring nightmare. And I will tell you, in those early days, I thought to myself, maybe I'm not smart enough for this profession. Maybe I'm not good enough for this profession. Maybe I didn't study enough. Maybe I didn't learn enough. Maybe I don't have a high enough IQ to do the work that, needs to be done. And then as I looked around and I started, because you also think, well, maybe I'm just in a bad company. Maybe I have bad management. So I would look around at other companies and I found out everybody was having these problems. And that's when I started to think, maybe I don't want to be in this profession anymore. Maybe I should go start a canoe camp in the boundary waters of Minnesota and escape civilization. In your world, you might be on boats fishing, and that sort of thing, because that's what brings you joy. And so I faced a really serious moment in my heart for my profession. And of course, the very difficult part was, like you, I have a family. I have a wife, I have 3 daughters, we have a house, we have a couple of cars. It's an expensive life. This job I had, this profession I was in, paid me really well. And so now you're trapped. You have the financial rewards that you always dreamed about, but you don't have the career rewards you always dreamed about. And in those moments of tension and frustration, either you run away or you run towards change. And I chose the run towards change moment.
Wow. Richard, a lot of people will not be able to walk away from those things that handcuff them, right? And then they will continue to work and not being happy. But you decided to uncuff and set yourself free so you can do the things that you love and make significant change in your life, right? And that was not an easy decision. And a lot of people got trapped onto that comfort zone, and so back then, what strength did you give to yourself so that you can decide to make that significant move and transform?
I had some people in my life who made a big difference. In 1996, just before I got promoted to vice president, a new boss came into the company. His name is Bob Nero. And Bob became the CEO of the company I'd worked for then, and the name of that company was Interface Systems. And Bob was a different kind of leader. I'd never had a boss quite like Bob. And he started connecting me with professional coaches who would help grow me as a leader, who would help me look deeply inside of myself and make some big decisions. And I think there are probably in everyone's career, there are those people who step in that you didn't expect, that start whispering in your ear, you're going to be okay. Keep going. I've got you covered. I will help you when you struggle. Sometimes we listen to those people and sometimes we don't. And for whatever reason, in those days, I decided to listen and listen deeply to those people who were trying to help me. And they awakened a dreamer inside of me, quite frankly, a dreamer that had been there a long time. But that dreamer had been asleep. Was the dream of a young man. When I was a student at the University of Michigan, I had a dream for the kind of company I wanted to be a part of. I had a dream to be an entrepreneur. I had a dream to be an author. I had a dream to be the kind of leader that I admired from afar when I read books about great leaders in business. And then I took that dream and I put it in a little box and I put it on a shelf and I went and lived my life. And life gets hard. Life gets busy. And I never thought about the dream again until these professional coaches and my new boss started to awaken it, started to have me peek inside that box again. And I will tell you at first, it was hard to look back inside that box because when I put those dreams in that box, I was about 20 years old. When I reopened the box, I was about 40 years old. And I'm sure there was a moment inside of that where I thought, those were just the dreams of a young man. Let them go. That's not reality. It's not possible. But those coaches awakened not only the dreamer, but the doer. And I just started working one thing at a time, one thing after another, trying new things, running experiments, as we like to say here at Menlo. And it was working. And when things start to change and when they start to work, that almost becomes an accelerant. It starts to build. It's like a snowball rolling down a hill, and you realize, hey, I have a 3-year-old granddaughter. Her name is Colette. We call her Coco, and she has this wonderful quality that I hope she keeps her whole life. When you're 3, you're trying all kinds of new things, right? A skateboard or whatever. And when she accomplishes what she was trying to do, she shouts out, "I did it! I did it!" Right? And it's so exciting to hear her. You can just feel her enthusiasm when she's like, "I did it!" I watched her do this and I realized that's a really good phrase for us adults to use. When we try something we've never tried before and we accomplish something we never thought was possible, we should just sit there in our glee and say, "I did it." And I have been doing that more lately, having learned that from her. And it's amazing that builds this momentum inside of you where you start to realize, maybe, and this might be too much of a dreamer statement, anything is possible.
Wow. In that 1996, right, Bob and the coach whispering into your ears. What did they whisper to your ear that make you decided to look back onto the box that you've been kept hidden for long?
I had been so, I want to be careful with this word because I know a lot of people really suffer hard with this, and I don't think I ever did. But I had been so depressed for so long that when I first met with these coaches, when I first started talking to Bob himself, I just waved him off. I said, "Nope, that's not me." But these coaches were persistent. These coaches kept pushing. And this is too strong a word, but they kind of yelled at me.
Oh.
They didn't really yell at me, but they kind of grabbed me by the shirt, and I'm saying this all figuratively, of course. It kind of shook me and said, "You have great potential. You're wasting it. You are everything you need to be, and you're wasting it." And they didn't say it quite like that, but that was the message. They were grabbing me. And at first I was like, no, I don't, because I was thinking of all those failures along the way. But like everything else in life, when you hear something and maybe your initial response is, no, that's not for me. You have it wrong. You don't understand what I've been through. But then, of course, in the quiet moments, when you're home, when you're falling asleep, when you're waking up in the middle of the night, when you're waking up in the morning, those messages from them started to just really resonate with me. And I started thinking more deeply. And there was this key moment, actually, I can remember it like it was yesterday. After the coaches have been working with me a while and I started listening a little bit, started responding a little bit, Bob called me into his office. It was late afternoon, and he said, "Rich, I have a promotion in mind for you. I want to move you up to the vice president of research and development, which is the biggest part of the company. I want to put you in charge of that. I want you to take all of the skills and all of the natural talents you have as a leader and help turn this struggling research and development organization around." And in that moment, I looked at him and I said, "No, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in signing up for the uncapped personal commitment required to be an executive inside of a troubled company." Bob got very angry with me that night. And he raised his voice with me, which to me sounded like yelling because Bob was such a calm guy, but I'm sure he wasn't yelling at me. But I left his office that night and we were both upset. He was upset because I was part of his plan to turn the company around and I said no. And I was upset for him asking me to do that. And I went home that night. And I don't like to upset people. That's not in my nature. So there was part of me that was disappointed that I did that to Bob, somebody who I trusted, somebody who trusted me, somebody who was investing in me. And I thought about it. And I sat in the quiet in my home thinking. And I would say it was that night that the box on the shelf with the dreams inside of it really opened up for me. And I said to myself, this is your moment. This is what you've been waiting for. It's not going to be easy, but what it is important. So I went back to Bob the next day because I thought through all those books I've been reading. I thought of the dreams of my youth. I thought of the possibility of a blank sheet of paper again that could
Hey, Richard.
kind of a bold move, I would say. And he said, "What's that?" And I said, "I need your help, Bob, because I want to build the best damn software team this town has ever seen. And I don't know exactly how I'm going to do that, but I'm excited." And he looked at me and he said, "What happened last night?" He says, "Yesterday you said no, we parted angry, and now you're coming back not only to say yes, but yes with yes and I'm going to build the best damn software team Ann Arbor's ever seen." And I told him about the dreams of my youth. I told him about all the books I'd been reading. I told him all my frustrations, but I told him my desire, what I was going to do.
Oh,
And I will tell you, in that day, that moment, that morning, my life changed.
wow. Wow. Richard, before I go back, you go to the box and ask what's inside the box. 20 years ago that you put it there, right? I want to ask you this question because that boss, Bob, did he ever tell you why did he put his trust on you that you're gonna be the person he chose to make a turnaround for the company?
He did.
Mm.
When Bob came on board as the new CEO, he'd been brought in from the outside. So he didn't know anything about the company other than what the board of directors had told him. And they hired Bob. And I will tell you, in 1996, when Bob was brought in, Interface Systems, the company he was going to be CEO of, this public company, was troubled, deeply troubled. The previous management team had been swept out the door because of the troubles. Bob was brought in to fix this troubled organization. And it was the first time Bob would ever be a CEO of a public company. He'd been CEO before, but never of a public company. So this was new territory for Bob as well. And so Bob, not knowing anyone, not knowing the company, but knowing significant change had to happen, decided he was going to walk around the company and get to know people. Just meet one-on-one with people throughout the organization. And he started asking them, hey, don't pay attention to the existing management structure. Let's assume we can start from a blank slate. And he would just ask people around the company, who would you say I should be paying attention to elevate as new leaders in this company? And a lot of those people kept pointing him to me and said, go talk to Rich Sheridan. You want to get to know him. Now, I was about 3 layers down in management in the company at that point. And quite frankly, because of what I call my personal trough of disillusionment, my depression, I was hiding. I had no interest in being a leader, especially under the old management system that was there. And so Bob came to me back then, and he brought me into his office, and I didn't know why he was doing it. And he said, Rich, I'm going around the company. I keep asking people, who should I meet? Who should I pay attention to? Who has great potential here? And he said, everyone here is pointing me to you. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, whatever, not interested. So what? And he could tell, I was obviously very bitter from the previous experiences. But Bob was just gentle. He didn't push me then. He started bringing in those coaches. He brought them in not just for me, but for a lot of his growing executive team. And I think a lot of them just kind of said, oh, coaches, do we really need coaches? Come on. That sounds offensive. But for some reason, when I got the coaches, I listened. When that door closed and they gave me some assessment tools and they talked me through some things, and then they started grabbing my shaking me and saying, you have everything you need. You have to wake up. And that was probably what they were really trying to do, was just wake me up out of that slumber, wake me up out of my depression, wake me up to my potential. And so, I had been with the company at that point since about 1984, so this is about 12 years. And so, they kind of had 12 years of stuff to shake off of me before they could get through. My ears were plugged with dirt.
Wow. Then the question that I'm curious to know, Rich, is this: what did you do that every fingers were pointed you back then by majority of the people at the company when it come into aspiration and change, and they recommend Bob to talk to you? So what did you do differently?
I think my nature is to be a very relational person. to
Uh,
build relationships with other people, to get to know them as people, not
mm,
worrying about where they are in the hierarchy or anything like that, but just always supporting people. And I know there were a lot of people in the company who were as frustrated as I
mm,
was, and probably themselves saw that there was a better way of doing things, but they didn't know what it was. Neither did I, for that matter. Um, but for whatever reason, we would end up in conversations. We
mm,
might go out to lunch. We might talk about what our hopes and dreams are for our careers, for the company, what we thought could be different. And so I think they saw in me that dreamer that had
mm.
that box on the shelf. And I never really talked about that probably that much, but I think people sensed uh, my compassion, my willingness to listen, my willingness to think about new ways of doing things.
Mm.
And I think I think whenever you're in a troubled situation, everybody's looking for hope
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
And then I also I probably got involved in a lot of things. I often coach young people when they're just graduating from college and that sort of thing, and they ask me, what's the best way to grow inside of my new career?
Mm.
And I tell them, just raise your hand and volunteer for things.
Wow.
If you're an engineer like I was, and some salesperson says, hey, I'm going on a customer call, I need an engineer with me to be able to explain our products, make sure you raise your hand and say, I'm willing to go.
Mm.
If the company is planning their annual holiday party and they need some extra hands to help out, just raise your hand and say, I can help with that.
Mm.
If at the time there was part of the company I was at that did manufacturing, and we got a big order and they needed extra hands just to put chips in boards, and I said, I can help with
Wow.
that. And so I think that willingness to volunteer, to help out, to step away from my title and my role and my background and just help out with other things probably helped me build endearing relationships with other people in the company who saw me as someone who was willing to chip in wherever help was needed, regardless of whether it was exactly appropriate given my role and my title and that sort of thing.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. That is rare to see now, in these days around the world. I love to see people like that more, right? So it's time to unveil what's inside the box. Okay, so let's travel back to when you were 20 years old with a lot of dreams, with a lot of energy and ambitious to create something significant. Share with us what was that dream during that, that inside that box, though, Richard.
Yeah, it was. I remember exactly where I was when I put everything inside that box, and it
Mm,
was literally I can almost see the place right from here because I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where I went to school, and I was about 2 blocks away from here on the main street of the university is called State Street, and right near State Street is this wonderful little outside mall called Nichols Arcade. And I was getting closer and closer to graduation. I was, thinking about my future. And back then, when you're a college student and you're learning all this new stuff that was very exciting to me, all of the things about software and computers and that sort of thing,
mm,
I knew, and this would have been sort of 1980 or so.
mm,
Um, it was a very exciting time in the software industry.
mm,
The PC was just about to come out. Computers were everywhere. They needed programmers, galore and that sort of thing. And it was for me, software is like being an artist. Writing software is like artistry. There's a lot of different opportunities to be very creative in software. And so I was in that moment, very excited about my future. And I started to think about, where do I want to work? What do I
mm,
want work to look like? And I started thinking about the space we would be in.
mm,
I was imagining an old building, a big open old building with high ceilings and filled with human beings collaborating together. That there would be human energy that was palpable in the room, that there would be camaraderie and teamwork, mutual respect for one another, people encouraging each other every day to get better and better at what they do, because not simply to tell them you need to be better, but let me help you be better. So people who are very helpful to one another. And that in that room, we would be creating great new things in software. We would be creating things that would perhaps help change the world, that would be recognized for the contribution we make. Because I thought all of these opportunities were possible in the software industry, and that I would be part of it, that we would be at the forefront of how software was being built, not just what software is, but the actual process of how software would be being built. And that we would be recognized as having made a significant contribution to the world for what we were doing. And that, again, that I would be there. I would be a part of it. There would be some part of my creativity and imagination that would help make that happen. And I remember being very, very excited about my future because of that. And I put all of those things in that little gift wrapped box, and then I put it on the shelf, and I went to my next class, and then I graduated, and then I got my jobs, and then I started my work, and then I got depressed. And then all of a sudden, and it actually hit me about 6 years into Menlo. So this would have been about 2007 or so. Came into the office one day, and it was a big, wide open brick building, old building, about 100 years old, filled with human beings, collaborating with one another, working in pairs, lots of human energy, lots of palpable human energy. And it hit me. And the box opened. And it was almost like this little Jack in the Box came out and said, "Congratulations.
I know.
You did it.
Yeah.
You accomplished the dream of the 20-year-old.
Wow.
And I will tell you, it was mind-blowing, because I had never thought about that box for those intervening 25 years.
Wow.
It just never occurred to me to think about it. And yet there was clearly some little silent driver in the back of my head that was guiding me the whole way to get me to that point. It was a very powerful moment.
Yeah, because inside your heart and your head is already there. So it drives every decision, every direction that you make. When every decision that you make is steering to that moment of letting the little Jack inside of the box to come out and say, "Hey, congratulations, Richard, for fulfilling your dream," right? And I want to bring on to you back, 8 years before that, 6 years before that, before the move, that you open, you start Menlo, right? Is that the moment that you significantly make change in the previous company that you and Bob was working together before it was acquired, right? And then, if I remember it correctly, so you gave him the commitment to change the company around, and and then all of that excitement, all of the knowledge, all of that energy you put in, and all of a sudden the office closed and everybody was dismissed. So it's like killing the dream. And normally, when you've been in the low mood before, you got a dose of excitement and a commitment, and then you got hit in the face again. Normally, a lot of people will collapse again and go back to the stage even worse than the stage before. But you did not. To tell us what strength did you give to yourself in 2000, 2002, 1999, 2000?
2001,
Yeah.
Yep.
To
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was another dream that had always been there, and it was a little more explicit than the one in the box. And it was simply that by the time I was probably 14 or 15 years old, and I'd already been programming on computers for a couple of years in high school. So this would have been, around about 1972 or 1973, and I'm still a kid. I started doodling. I take a pencil and a piece of paper. And what I was doodling was the imagined logos of a future company that I would form. I imagined being an entrepreneur. I imagined that one day I would start my own company. And I remember when I told my wife these dreams, when we were just dating and getting ready to get married, and I told her, honey, you don't have to worry about the future. I'll be so successful that I'll be able to retire by the time I'm 29 years old because it'll be so crazy successful. And she remembers me telling her that she's sitting right over here working right alongside of me. We both turned 65 this year, so we apparently, there's some dreams that don't come true, or maybe I'm not sure I would have actually ever really desired that anyways, because I love what I do, but I had always imagined that I would be an entrepreneur someday. And many times along the way throughout my career, there was an idea that popped up, some product or something, and there were some people I worked with. And I thought, maybe I can get these people and we form a company and we do this thing. And I would go out to lunch with them and we'd talk, over lunch about these ideas, these crazy ideas. But for some reason in my heart, those earlier moments never felt quite right, because I've always believed, I'm a very relational person, that if I'm going to start a company, I'm going to start it with someone else. I'm not going to do it alone. I need others around me. I don't want just people working for me. I want co-founders to help me, because I am incomplete. I have too many blind spots. I need others around me to help me fill in my incompleteness and my blind spots. And so as I looked at these other people I would go out to lunch with, I'm like, are they them? It was almost like dating, when you're deciding, is this the person for me for the rest of my life, and I would always conclude, no, this either wasn't the right opportunity or these weren't the right people. I don't know, just gut instinct. And then in 1999, I met James Goldball. I brought him in as a consultant to help me with that transformation in interface systems. When we were acquired in September of 2000, the new company, my new bosses said, James is too expensive as a consultant, send him away. And I remember just being heartbroken that I could no longer work with James Goebel. And it became this all-consuming thought in my head at the time, how will I ever work with James Goebel again? I can't hire him. The contract we had between his firm and ours prevented that. My boss won't let me bring him in as a consultant because he's too expensive, which I understood. I needed to work with James Goebel again. And then one night, about 3 a.m, I woke up, sat up in bed, yelled out, I've got it. And my wife is lying next to me, sound asleep, and she wakes up and she's like, what are you doing? I said, I've solved the problem. And she said, what? What are you talking about? I said, I know how I'm going to work with James Goebel again. And she says, okay, well, what? I said, I'm going to quit the company I'm working for. I'm going to start a new business. James will be my co-founder, and we're going to start a whole new business. Now, at the time, that was an insane proposition because I was this incredibly highly paid executive inside of this public company that wanted to grow my team from the 40 it was to 300. And I mean, I was on a rocket ship at that point. And Carol's looking at me like, go back to sleep. There's no way you're going to leave that company. There's no way you're going to walk away from, whatever hundreds of thousands of dollars they were going to pay me to be that vice president. And then, of course, within 6 months, it's all gone. But I'd already had the plan. And so I went to James and I said, I think this is the moment.
But then you didn't even ask James before that. But 3 a.m. in the morning, you woke up and you talked to Karen and you say, okay, you're going to start a company with James. What did he say to you about that moment at 3 a.m.? You went up, you got up and talked and thought of him starting business with you.
Yeah, again, I didn't think about that again until 6 months later when I lost my job. His company was going through the exact same thing that mine was. So he had also been in a company that had been acquired by a California company, and they had to shutter every remote office they had too. And so there James and I were going out. We talked about it while playing golf, which is one of our favorite hobbies together. We play golf together a lot. And I said, this is what I'm thinking of doing. And he said, yeah, I think we can do that.
Wow.
And we did. We just started getting together, and there were two other founders with us at the time. And within weeks, we had formed, this was probably late April that I was going out to play golf with him. And by June 12th, we had a company formed.
Wow.
And we were on our way.
What was it about him that was so special years ago, 20-something years ago to you that you say, okay, that's going to be James that you're going to partner with? Yeah.
I brought him in as a consultant to do one very specific thing, and it was to teach my programmers a new technical way of working called object-oriented programming. That's not how I learned to program when I was in college. It was the new wave of programming, and with the internet coming into play and Java being the biggest language of the internet and Java being an object-oriented language, my team had to learn this new way of thinking about how to write software. And James and his consulting company knew how to teach us this. So I brought James and a few of his consultants in to help teach my team how to do object-oriented development. And James, and it was a big contract. It was an expensive contract to bring him in. I had to convince Bob Nero to spend this money on my team. But James kept coming by my office as we were starting this whole thing, and he kept asking me a really interesting question, a frustrating question, actually. He said, Rich, what problem are you trying to solve?
Wow.
Like, what do you mean? He said, you're bringing my team in to help teach your team this particular way of working. He says, what problem are you trying to solve? And I said, James, the problem is obvious. I need to teach my team how to work in this new language of the internet. And he's like, Rich, that's a solution. That's not a problem. What problem are you trying to solve? And he and I started having these very deep discussions. I didn't get frustrated with him. I just listened. I could tell this was somebody who was going to hear my blind spots. He was going to make me more complete. And so we started having these great discussions about teamwork, about organizational design. I started hearing about the books he was reading and comparing them to the books I was reading. And he was getting an MBA at Eastern Michigan University at night after hours. And his professors were teaching him some of the things that my coaches were teaching me. And so and then he said something about me one day. He said, you're not behaving like a normal customer. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you keep saying yes to everything I suggest. He says, you have to say no at least once, or you'll be able to hold me accountable for the results. And I said, James, I'm not trying to hold you accountable. I actually want to succeed. And he looked at me and he said, I've never met a customer like you. He says, most customers are trying not to fail. He says, I've never met one who's actually trying to succeed.
Beautiful.
And at that moment, he and I became a pair, and we just marched forward into the unknown. We started running crazy experiments. He'd suggest something crazy. I'd say, yes, let's go do it. We did it. We're like, I did it. And it was hard. It wasn't, change is never easy, as I'm sure you know, but we did it. And I will say for both of us, everything that was a result of what we were trying to do exceeded our expectations. Problems we thought that we would never solve were solved easily. And it just became clear that he and I were meant to be together, much like you describing pulling Seattle out of the jar twice. And suddenly you just listen and you say, yes, I'm going to Seattle, even if that wasn't what I was planning on. So,
Richard, when you were young, you had the dream to become a commercial airline pilot, right? And then you have another dream later on to run in your own company. You even draw about the company, what kind of company, what kind of leader, what kind of even the environment is gonna be in, right? And then now you have a bigger dream. I'm sure, about bringing joy to the workplace, and you do it really, really well. Tell us, how can leaders out there join force with you so that they can create a workplace a better place for everybody?
well, this, let me ask you a question first,
Yes.
because I think this might be important to your listeners. How did you find out about me?
How did I find out about you? Right?
Yes.
Yes. I was in the quest to change the workplace also. So that's why I came up to knowing about you and the works that you do.
And did you read Joy Inc. somewhere along the way?
Along the
The
way,
book?
we don't have the book in Vietnam yet, but I already ordered both of them, and my friend's gonna bring over to Vietnam in January of 2023. Yep.
Nice. And I think, this is the other dream I've always had, and I've gotten to do it, which is wonderful, is to be an author. And the main reason, I love to write. So for me, writing is just pure joy. And I loved the impact, the inspirational impact that other authors had on me. And so when I thought about writing books, all I could think about was the reader. How would the reader be inspired to change themselves? So I wanted to write a book that would be read by people I would never meet, who would then go on to be inspired to do great things on their own. Not necessarily exactly the way I've done them, but just simply that I could plant a seed of change in their minds that would allow them to start to believe in themselves again, the way I learned to believe in myself again. That the crazy dreams of the entrepreneur, the crazy dreams of the dreamer aren't too crazy, that you can actually go and do the things you wanted to do, and that I'm at least one example of somebody who got out of their trough of disillusionment and got to joy. And I remember arguing with my editor at Penguin about telling the story of where I came from, how I spend about the first third of Joy Inc. talking about the backstory that you and I have explored in this conversation. And she's like, I'm not sure people want to read that. I said, oh, believe me, they do. because when I talk about it, what people see is themselves in my story. They say, wait, I'm right now in my career where Rich was in his, when he was in his trough of disillusionment, and he escaped. Now I want to learn how he did it. And so I would suggest to your listeners that a great place to start is reading Joy Inc. And in the back of the book, I talk about authors that have also greatly influenced me. So if your listeners are in their own trough of disillusionment, wondering how they can escape, my first suggestion to them is become readers and be inspired by authors. They are your teachers. Now, it isn't good enough just to be inspired. You need to now start running experiments. You need to try things. You need to take action versus take a meeting. And so now, obviously, what I didn't have in those early days that the world has now is I didn't have a Menlo to go look at, right? If people are interested, they can come on tours. We do free virtual public tours of Menlo twice a week. Just click on a link and they're here, and click on a link and they're home. So, we do those twice a week, and we get, I think, since we never did virtual tours before the pandemic, and then of course that was the only thing we could do. We've always done tours of Menlo. People can come visit. That's the other thing they can do is take a flight to Detroit, Michigan, take a 30-minute drive to Ann Arbor from the Detroit Metro Airport, and come visit us. Wow. Be here with us. Learn from us. Talk to our team members who are part of this. Learn our philosophies. Learn our practices. Learn about our culture. I didn't have a Menlo when I was starting out. I didn't have a shining example that I could go look at. And to be sure, we also don't believe we found the one true way of working or anything like that. But it's so helpful to have an example that you can probe into and ask deep questions about, much like you did so wonderfully in this interview.
Richard, I really admire the works that you build at Menlo, because like the working hours and the touring and everything let the people to freely to speed up and share ideas and stuff, because a lot of people out there working in the working place at the moment still similar to 1997 that you had. They went out of the work, the college, the university, really full energy, got into a workplace, and all dreams killed. They work, like extremely hard, and then under a lot of, like stress and deadlines, and future looks really, really unclear to a lot of them. So thanks for leading the way and be inspiration for a lot of people. I like to ask you one last question. I know that it's already 10 minutes past, so normally I ask two last questions, but I'll ask you one for now. Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
Okay. You mentioned the word thinking a lot in this interview. All right. My wife and I, we have a different dream. We have a dream of helping people to improve their ability to think, because we believe that thinking, if we have a good thinking, then we can go to the good actions that can make a positive change. So every chance that I talk to expert like you, we ask this question: over the 65 years that you've been living and working, how have you been helping you to improve your ability to think?
I think there's a basic truth I believe inside of all of us individually, and it isn't about truth versus lies or something. It's about as I think it was Shakespeare said, "To thine own self be true," and there is a wiring inside of each of us that we need to understand. And I would say that my journey over these 65 years, and you have you have explored that journey in ways no other interviewer has done. So I want to congratulate you on just a wonderful interview. You you have gotten me to tell stories that no one's ever asked me to tell before, all in one episode. So I am going to treasure this interview.
Wow.
Okay, because and I want to share this with people, my family even, because this will give them deep insights into who I am as a person. But along the way, what I learned is that life, and particularly entrepreneurial life, is a journey of self-discovery.
Mm.
It is a journey to self. And it's amazing how often in our lives we deny who we are as people. We deny how we are wired. We believe there's something wrong with us and we need to change to conform how the world thinks about us. And I would say my journey of thinking was to figure out, why am I so troubled in all of these other areas of my life? What is it that's bothering me? And what could be done about it? And so I think we just simply need to pour our excess energy, our time, just in thinking about how to make our world and the world a better place. Wow. And that, in fact, if we are driven by a need to leave the world a better place than we found it, and that we have a unique contribution to make, that we should spend our time thinking about, who are we? How do we use who we are to make that contribution to the world? And how do we think about how we deny those other voices that say, no, you're just dreaming. It can't happen that way. You need to go conform to the way the world wants. And so that would be my general thoughts on how each of us should think about what the future holds and what we want it to hold for us.
Wow. Richard, thanks a lot for sharing that beautiful advice. And yes, it's a journey that for self discovery to everybody. And I hope that in that journey, each of the listener, each of the people out there will be able to find the help, the support, the coach, the boss, the mentor that can help them to fight faster, to fight smoother, and to fight with joy, like you are doing, and then share. If they found their way, then share the secrets to others also. So, Richard, I really admire you and the works that you do. I wanna say thank you for your generosity to spend your time to join and share your stories with our audience. I wish you all the best, and I wish your message will get further to more people, so that they can bring joy to their lives, to their workplace also, and enjoy the holiday seasons. Please send our love to your family also, please.
Thank you, Han. This has been a wonderful time with you.
Thank you very much. You have a wonderful day, all right? Bye-bye.